Chapter 5 is Unexpected Guests. It wasn't until the next morning when the twins woke up in their motel room that they were able to fully comprehend the seriousness of their situation. Getting rid of Dr. Warsaw at the house on the rock had not solved their problem, as they had thought. No, their problem had just begun. People were still after them. Coke and Pep would have to live with that fact, maybe until they themselves were dead, or the people who were trying to kill them were dead. Maybe it was just Archie Clone who was after them now. Or maybe Mrs. Higgins and the Bowler dudes were still out there somewhere too. Maybe there were others as well. It makes it kind of hard to get through your everyday life, knowing that at any moment somebody might try to throw you off a cliff, dip you into boiling oil, drown you in a vat of spam, or bury you alive in a sand dune. That's no way to live. We got to tell Mom and Dad, Coke said to his sister as they brushed their teeth that morning. This isn't some game. The game is over. Mom and Dad will know what to do. Agreed. After showering and getting dressed, Coke and Pep knocked on the door of their parents' room. Dr. and Mrs. McDonald were already dressed and ready to go downstairs to the little breakfast room next to the motel lobby. They were in the middle of the discussion about Dr. McDonald's next book, his last one, The Impact of Coal on the Industrial Revolution. Had not sold very well. Honey, maybe you should write about something a little more commercial next time, Mrs. McDonald suggested delicately. What, like Britney Spears? Dr. McDonald replied with sarcasm in his voice. Maybe I should write a book about Lindsay Lohan's love life. Lots of people would buy that. No, Ben, I mean, we need to talk to you about something, Coke told his parents. What is it, sweetie? Mrs. McDonald said with concern as they made their way to the breakfast room. Coke took a deep breath. You may find this a little hard to believe, he began, but Pep and I are part of a secret government program. It's called the Genius Files. Silence. They continued up to the buffet line to get their food. Go on, urged Dr. McDonald. Ever since we left California, Pep told them, there have been these crazy people who have been trying to kill us. They forced us to jump off a cliff back home, and they blew up a building we were in right next to our favorite Chinese restaurant, Coke said. And they left us to die at the singing sand dune, Pep added. And they tried to drown us at the Spam Museum. And they tried to boil us yesterday in oil. Dr. McDonald held up his hand to stop them. So you're telling me, or you're telling us, that these people are still out there, he said, and that your lives are in danger? Right, Pep said. We would have told you about this earlier, but we had been sworn to secrecy. They sat down at a table. We have GPS devices implanted in our heads, Coke added, so the bad guys who are trying to kill us know where we are at all times. Dr. and Mrs. McDonald stared at the twins for a long time. Then they burst out into hysterical laughter. Dr. McDonald said through the tears that were streaming down his face. That's a good one. GPS devices in your heads? It's not even April Fool's Day, said Mrs. McDonald as she wiped her face with a napkin. How do you kids come up with this stuff? You two are so imaginative. No, we mean it, Coke protested. We're totally serious. You guys crack me up, Dr. McDonald said, unable to stop laughing. Bridge, I'm so glad we changed our mind and decided to have children after all. Our kids never cease to amaze me. They do say the darndest things, said Mrs. McDonald. So much for that idea. It didn't look like their parents were going to be any help at all. Coke and Pep have to live or die on their own. As their parents chuckled and lingered over their coffee, the twins went outside to talk things over privately. What are we going to do now? Pep asked. How should I know? Maybe we should call the police. Are you out of your mind? They'll never believe us, Coke told her. Mom and Dad didn't believe us. You think the cops will? Ever since they were little, Coke had been the big brother. Even though he was only a few minutes older, Pep had come to rely on him to get them out of jams using his mouth, his fists, a deck of cards, a cheese head, or whatever happened to be lying around. Now, though, Coke worried about what was going to happen next. That Archie clone who tried to French fry them could be anywhere. He could be watching them right now, or listening in on their conversations. They would have to track him down. They might have to kill him before he killed them. And what about Mrs. Higgins? What about those crazy bowler dudes? What about the other Genius File kids who might be gunning for them so they could claim the $1 million? And what about Dr. Warsaw? Maybe he had survived the fall and was out there somewhere, concocting more intricate secret messages and plans to kill them. As the twins walked back to their room to pack up their stuff and check out of the motel, two maids were blocking the hallway with big carts loaded up with towels, cleaning supplies, and those little plastic shampoo bottles they leave in the rooms. "Excuse me," Pep said politely, assuming that would be enough to send the message that they needed to get past. The maids didn't turn around. One was holding a broom, and the other was fiddling with a vacuum cleaner. "Pardon me," Coke said, a little more forcefully. "We need to get to our room." "No speaky English," said one of the maids in a vague accent. Coke rolled his eyes and pushed his way past the two carts and gestured for Pep to follow him. That's when both maids clapped their hands over the twins' mouth and grabbed them forcefully from behind. "What the—" "Keep your mouth shut and you won't get hurt," one of the maids grunted in a male voice as Pep tried to bite the hand over her mouth. "Let us go," Pep tried to holler. The maids dragged Coke and Pep roughly down the hall and used a key to open a door with no room number on it. Then they shoved the twins into the room, followed them inside, and slammed the door behind them. It was a storage room with racks filled with towels on the walls. Who are you?" Pep demanded. "What do you want from us?" The maids ripped wigs off their heads and smiled broadly. "Maya!" yelled Pep. "Bones!" yelled Coke. Now, if you had read the Genius Files Mission Unstoppable, you would know who Bones and Maya are. If you didn't read that book, well, maybe next time you'll listen when I tell you to do something. Bones was the custodian at the twins' school who had watched over them and initiated them into the Genius Files program. Maya was also on the Genius Files team. It was Maya who had given them wingsuits so they would survive their plunge over the cliff back home in California. There were hugs all around. The twins were grateful to see them, even if Bones did look a little strange wearing a maid's uniform. "Do you work here at the motel?" Pep asked. "Of course they don't work here, you dope," Coke said. "They're disguised as maids so people won't know who they really are." "We're undercover," Bones said. "I'm glad to see you two are alive and well." "Barely," Pep said. "Yesterday, this crazy teenager trapped us in a giant French fry cage and tried to drop us into boiling oil. What a way to celebrate our birthday." "Happy birthday," Maya said cheerfully. "We wanted to get you presents, but we didn't have time." Saving our lives would have been a nice present," Coke said as he pulled the ticket to the French fry simulator out of his pocket and showed it to Bones and Maya. "Hated day happy," Bones read off the ticket. "What do you think that means?" "I figured it out," Pep said. "It means happy death day." "This teenager who tried to kill you," Maya said, "what did he look like?" "He was kind of nerdy looking, chubby, and he had bright red hair," Pep told them, "like Archie from the comics." Bones and Maya looked at each other. "Archie Clone," they said together. "You know that kid?" Coke said. "Oh, yeah," Bones said. "We know him. The Genius Files kid. The renegade." "This is precisely the reason why Dr. Warsa had to end the Genius Files program," Maya told them. "He thought he would simply recruit genius kids from all over the country to solve America's problems, and that they would do whatever he told them. But kids don't always do what grown-ups tell them to do. And geniuses like Archie Clone, well, you never know what crazy things they might do. We suspect that he might be criminally insane," Bones added. "Kids made fun of him at school," Coke said. "Maybe that's what messed him up." "How did Archie Clone get that big truck?" Pep asked. "And all that French fry apparatus? It must have cost somebody a fortune." "He figured out a way," Bones said. "He's a very bright and resourceful young man. Some say he's trying to follow in Dr. Warsaw's footsteps. He may be trying to take over the Genius Files program now that Dr. Warsaw is gone. He told us he was going to kill off all the Genius Files kids," Pep said, "so that when he turns 21, he'll be the only one left and he'll get to keep the $1 million." Bones whistled. "Did he say anything else?" Coke and Pep thought back, trying to remember anything Archie Clone had said that might be important. Pep couldn't think of anything, but suddenly Coke snapped his fingers. "He did say two things." "What?" "One, he collects hats," Coke said. "And two, he said he had to give us the tour right away because he was on his way to Washington." "Washington, D.C. or Washington State?" Maya asked. "He didn't say," Coke replied. "Probably D.C., Bones said. "That's where we're heading," Pep said. "So are we," said Maya. "We've got to stop him before he hurts anybody." "How are we going to do that?" asked Coke. "We don't know," Bones replied. "How are we going to find him?" asked Pep. "We don't know that either," replied Maya. "You don't know a whole lot, do you?" said Coke. "We'll be in touch," Bones said. "You kids can relax now. Try to enjoy your vacation. Have fun with your parents. Maya and I will head for Washington. Hopefully, this whole thing will be over before you get there. Can you give us a cell phone number or some way to reach you? Asked Pep. Too dangerous, Maya replied. We are constantly being monitored. Here, Bone said as he reached into the maid's cart and handed the twins a plastic bag. Take some of these. You're giving us little bars of soap? Pep asked as she looked into the bag. It's not plain old soap, you dope, Cole told her. It's exploding soap, right? You throw it at somebody, you can take their head off like a hand grenade. That stuff is cool. It's not exploding soap, Bones told him. I know, Coke said. It's a special GPS soap. You plant it on somebody and then you can track them, even when they're in the shower, and then it melts away without leaving a trace. How do you how do you people come up with this stuff? It's brilliant. No, said Maya. There's no such thing as GPS soap. I know, Coke said excitedly. You put two of them over your eyes, and they function as night vision goggles, right? It's just soap, Bones said wearily. What are we supposed to do with plain old soap? Coke commanded. You wash yourselves with it, Bones said. I figured it might come in handy in your RV. How do you expect us to save the world with little bars of soap? Coke asked. We need some weapons, and preferably cool weapons, like the kind they have in action movies. We don't have any cool weapons, Maya said. This is strictly a low budget operation. Hey, you're the ones who are geniuses, Bone told them. You figure it out. We need to go now. Before we leave, I need to ask you something, Maya said. Did you tell your parents anything about the genie's files? We tried to, but they didn't believe us, Pep replied. Good, Maya said. They must not know, ever. If they find out, their lives will be in danger, too. Hey, one last thing we need to know before you go, Coke said. Is Dr. Warsaw dead or alive? We think he's dead, but we're not sure, Bones said. We searched for his body in the woods around the house on the rock, but by the time we got there, it was gone. Good luck, Maya said, hugging each of the twins. Be careful. We are with you always. If you're with us, Coke said, you would have given us some of those frisbee grenades you have, or a flamethrower, or something that we could actually use to defend ourselves. Goodness, no, said Maya. That would be dangerous. Then at least clean our room, Pep said. It's a mess.